Hello, and welcome to the WOWORK podcast, a series of playful legal dissections on the most curious and alarming events in the world of work. The podcasters Alan Girl, Trajce Svetkovsky, and Sara debate how to craft a better experience of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. And remember, none of the things we talk about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work.
Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Create a new path, don't let the people follow your signs. Educate your mind.
That was a deflection. You see how my mom listens to these podcasts and she goes, "What? How come we hear all these personal disclosures about you, Sara, and the lawyer boys are Teflon?"
No, I'm going to disclose. Teflon, Alan. Well, Alan.
Count. Come on. Let's hear about the count.
Before I do that,
Teflon
I'll
again.
disclose.
He did it again. Deflect number 2.
Come on, Alan. How have you been?
How are you? What's happening? Give
What's
me
happening in your
something.
life?
Give me something to play with here.
Well, as you both know, I've been bouncing in and out of Hobart quite a lot.
Cool.
Thinking
Tasmanian
about
salmon.
maybe securing a job down there and making the move.
Wow, man.
Oh, anybody hiring in Tassie?
Oh, you heard
Anybody
it
hiring in
first.
Tassie? I
Cool.
have some friends that moved to Tassie. Jane Teresa Anderson, whom you met years ago, I believe, at an event. She's Australia's leading dream analyst. And
Yes.
you remember
Yes,
her?
yes.
Yeah, and she speaks amazingly. She started podcasts before podcasts were a thing. Like, she had several going, and she has written books, and she's a dream alchemist, which helps you, I guess, understand your own psyche and unpack that. It's like a therapeutic model, and she's on, she's with Kochi, she's on
podcast is good.
TV.
It's good to listen to.
I mean, you see a dream analyst, a dream alchemist on TV, it's probably Jane Teresa Anderson. So your thing about Tassie, tell us more.
Well, fantastic weather, beautiful countryside, nice sized cities, not like Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne where you're battling for an hour to get into town.
So, okay,
Cool.
right. You're going to have a little bit of feedback on that one.
No, that'd be cool.
You like the cold?
I do. I prefer the cold, but
Okay.
right now, so it's summer when we're recording this, and it's over 30 degrees every single day in Brisbane, and down there it's just beautiful.
Okay. And you like agriculture, right? So is this the agricultural, the greenery, is that the...
Well, certainly the greenery. Yeah, it's lovely flying in over the open paddocks, and very nice.
Well, I've got a disclosure to make.
Oh, go on.
I've discovered...
So many.
Let's start with one.
Maybe the tape was rolling before.
Trish.
I've discovered Pilates.
Pilates! Yay! I know, I've got some
Pilates,
text me saying I'm on my way to Pilates. He even sent me a photo of his Pilates socks.
Yes.
Is there such a thing? Pilates socks?
Oh, yeah, you've got to
That's
wear
such a
them. And mine are safety Pilates socks.
Right. Is this on top of rock climbing?
I've given up rock climbing.
Oh, no.
For now,
Why?
Well, much
What
Alexander Shaker. And I'll tell you why. First of all, apart from looking at everyone else doing the other pieces of plastic that I can't do, that was demoralising. But no, it's
But you're up to purple or something.
Yeah.
I was up to purple. It's just the thought of landing, for me, incorrectly or inappropriately. I need someone close by to watch what I'm doing. So I use the Reformer Pilates Emporium
Pilates.
up the road, and I love it. I feel my core. I'm sort of re-engaging with the core, and I didn't think I would. I think, here we go. I'll go back to climbing if I don't like it. But 3 weeks now, so far so good.
Well, this would complement your climbing, right? Because you need that core stability and protect your back. How's your back feeling?
That's Pilates. I think it's because of Pilates. So I've explained to my son that once I've got this core engaged, hold on to that pass, I'll revisit.
There we
Because I
go.
do like climbing. It's just I seem to be enjoying Pilates better. So there you go. Little bit, flippant here and there, but you know what? It's exercise. So when the doctor says get some exercise, I say, what kind of exercise? Well, that's my response. It doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're doing it.
Sarah, you're quite skilled in Pilates, aren't you?
I teach Pilates.
Oh,
Yeah.
what?
I
You
teach
tell me that.
Pilates. Yeah, I teach. Well, I don't have regular classes right now, but I'm trained to teach Pilates, and I fill in when they need a Pilates instructor. And I teach yoga and cycle regularly, and cross train with my son. I used to teach a lot of classes in my younger years, but not just age, but because of lifestyle and other commitments, right? Competing commitments. But I love teaching classes.
That's why Sarah looks 30 years younger than us.
Well, Alan, what's your secret? Because you look a lot younger than me. What do you do to stay in shape and stay fit? What's your thing?
Well, I don't do Pilates. I don't do yoga. I don't cycle.
It looks like we're going to have to recruit him.
Yeah.
We're going to be recruiting
I reckon
Alan.
you come across as a walker, like a bushwalker or a
I do
hiker.
like walking. Yes.
Yeah, trekker.
Yep.
Yeah, you got to do something, and that's the point of that. As long as we keep moving.
So let's move into the session. What are we going to talk about today?
All right.
Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Create a new path and let the people follow your signs.
If I said this phrase to you, right to disconnect, in the context of work, this is the Why Work podcast, what do you think I'd mean by that? You have a right to disconnect.
A right not to be responsive at unusual times is what I think of. A right to disengage. You don't have to be on all the time. Is that fair?
It's not to go out dancing at a nightclub at night.
Maybe you don't even have to go to the Christmas party like season 1, episode 1, right?
No, I challenge you. It is your right to go to a disco dance club at night because you're disconnecting.
But not for work.
Not disconnecting, but disconnecting. That's right. In fact, I would encourage someone to, rather than check their emails at 10 p.m, to go out to a nightclub and have a bit of a tanz, as the Germans might say.
But it doesn't have to be a work-related event like a Christmas party. You have the right to disconnect, right?
And this is the thing.
The problem is we've all got these smartphones now that prompt us and alert us and encourage us to read our mail.
Oh, isn't technology great?
It's one of the reasons I won't do a smartphone. I'm a smartwatch. I won't do a smartwatch. And I was gifted one, and it was the sweetest, nicest, kind of gesture. But I don't want a buzz on my wrist. Looking at time all the time. Anyway, I haven't worn a watch since I was in my 20s. And
how do you tell the time?
Well, I can check my smartphone.
Okay.
That's enough. I don't want it constantly as a reminder that agitates me or distracts me from being present. And I also don't want text messages popping up on my wrist or emails popping up on my wrist all the time. So it's when I choose to engage. And my phone is on silent most of the time.
But you see, you're not that teacher. Alan, you're not that police officer. You're not that teacher, Sarah, who gets a snippy call from an irate parent or an over-entitled parent demanding you respond to their email at 7:34 p.m. on a Sunday. You're not that police officer.
Why do you need a right? Why do you need
legislated right?
Why do you? Yeah.
Hang on, is that an existential question? That is the thing. I'm curious because I'm going to read something out that popped up. I've known about this for a while, but the OHS Alert wonderful researchers picked up on this one, and I'll read the title: "Right to Disconnect Laws Recommended to Improve WHS."
Okay.
Australia has moved a step closer to harmonising the right to disconnect from work. The Federal State Education and Employment Legislation Committee made 10 recommendations into amending the Fair Work legislation to include a law which allows for a right to disconnect pursuant to the Fair Work Act. So why have we reached a point in this advanced, enlightened state that we need the legislature to remind employers that employees have a right to disconnect? It's bizarre.
It is strange. Now, I can understand that there'll always be a tension between employers and employees in that employers are reaching out to their employees outside normal business hours, but in that sort of dynamic, the employee doesn't need to respond outside the hours that they're employed for. So if they're employed 9 to 5, then they don't need to answer those text messages on the weekend. They just need to exercise some discipline. Now, if you introduce a legislative right to disconnect, will that change anything? Will that make a difference?
Well, here's the thing. What you've said is correct in every respect, but the trigger for this debate, and I think it's very welcome, is simply because, I use the word simply, which is so complicated, simply because of this trigger, intensification of workloads. So, Alan, if you're told to do your job Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, but, and I emphasise but, if your workload has been intensified and you cannot complete it, how do you disconnect? And that's why they've decided to have a debate about this. That workload intensification, it's a bit like jamming, 100 tomatoes in a jar for 50. Your pomodores are going to get pretty squished and ooze out of the jar. And that's how I see workloads at the moment. They are intensifying. And people are getting stressed.
I have to interject here because, in our consultancy with Viva, we're studying issues on workload management, and too often I see that definition interpreted in a really flat manner, as though it's just the volume of things you do or an industrial consideration of the shift work when you attend to things. And there is so much. I'm so glad you pointed out that simplicity is not that simple. In fact, there's a lot of complexity. Workload management is not looking only at volume of work. It's not the weekend times of work. Workload management can involve perceptions about my workload versus somebody else's workload, and that sense of organizational justice. It can be worsened by people who are aspiring, and they might take on a lot of duties, and it's more than the hours of time at work. It can be related to the volume of tasks that require rapid cognitive shifts. So if you have same hours, but just different tasks that have cognitive shifts per full stop, and then the nature of each task within that, something that's enjoyable versus something that's not as pleasurable, that can affect your perception of workload. Equally, there's so much, I can go on and on, but there's aspects of whether you feel protected and belong at work, right? These real basic neurological drivers, which, final note to self, finger in the air flag, I want to talk about today, right? So neurological behavioral drivers, if you feel well protected and that you belong and a strong sense of culture, and there's a good, I call it good operating rhythm and tribal culture at work, you might love what you're doing, and your concerns about workload management may diminish. It doesn't mean that it's completely resolved when you have a lot of work. You still need to do this and continually evaluate this in an agile manner. But sometimes other issues are impacting on this perception of workload. And so I get really cautious if a proper, cogent design strategy has not been undertaken to define the problem that needs to be solved. And throwing legislation like this means, hang on, I really want to see, how did they identify this problem? What were their methods? Because that's usually lacking, as organizations or countries or communities don't define the problems well, and they throw solutions at it.
Well, so this workload and the metrics is just one aspect. The other trigger for this inquiry also stemmed from two specific professions.
Okay.
Teachers and police officers, and one of the qualitative aspects, so not so much time, that is one thing, having to prepare for all your classes, but one of the biggest reasons for the push for legislative change for this right to disconnect is because and I'll quote, the unnecessary stress, for example, a parent being able to tell that a teacher has looked at a message and then expressing frustration because the teacher didn't respond quickly or adequately or something like that. So it's not just the workload per se, but also the attitudes and beliefs and expectations of the customer. Who is the customer? The fee-paying parent, or just simply the entitled parent who demands, I emphasise demands, an instant, the instant gratification. I texted you on Friday, why haven't you responded? Because it's Friday.
So what you're raising is a legitimate concern, but I'm not persuaded that introducing a legislative right is going to fix that particular problem. I think the parent is still going to be outraged and still going to express their concern. Being the difference between saying we'll respond to your messages during the working week or responding saying I've got a legislative right to disconnect, I don't know that makes things better.
Bingo. And when you said the word customer, Trajce, I started thinking, well, I'm often asking companies to think about all of their customers, what we call system actors and human factors. So sure, the parents are a customer, the students are a customer, but the teachers and the people that maintain the school system and the facilities, we're all customers, right? So because you need to attract and retain quality teachers, and so you do the corollary, you start to look at, hang on, side by side, I do these shadow personas, is what we've been talking about in journey maps. And if this is the parent's experience, what is the teacher's experience? And for teachers who need that mentoring, then it's incumbent upon some really good situational leadership skills about how to set those boundaries. But before that, for enduring impact of design, the school system has to support teachers with some automatic shields. Maybe it's like, hey, thank you for your email. Anything that comes in from Friday to so-and-so, we respect that we request 72 hours starting from the next Monday or whatever. There's some sort of bounce back message.
Exactly that. If you email the courts,
yes,
you'll get a message back like that.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
And a filter. And so no matter how I rate the teachers and then...
No, the parent.
How I rate the parent is, thank you for that correction, there is now at least a method to manage expectations that supports the teachers. And here's the other thing. Imagine AI that starts to pick up keywords in some of these emails and alerts a person who is more of a mentor, someone with better decision-making authority in the business, someone who is prepared and knows that this is their role, that they get that copy of an email the minute there's something like this, and that they can immediately go in and help protect and support that teacher and intervene. So imagine there's that, and the teacher's already told, this has been alerted, we're here to help you, contact so-and-so, I'm getting involved, right? So there's so many things we should look at the positive ways that we can leverage technology.
Yeah, and again, it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. I'm going to flip this. Isn't it the case, isn't it the reason why we have come to, again, the door of the law? Isn't it because, and I would agitate this point, it's because the system is not working, that leadership is failing, and it's just when they say court is the last resort, I think no one has been doing anything about this for a long time. The internet's been around, 20, 30, 40 years? Especially the last 20 years in the modern educative setting.
Yeah.
I reckon this is not a new or novel problem. This is a response because unions are fed up, because I think they have tried these sensible measures. So I'm astounded that we have to use the law for this.
How they really tried these sensible measures cross-industry and cross-nation, right? So this is a really good opportunity where school systems, let's just use Australia as an example, both private and public sectors could collaborate and articulate the problems in far more nuanced ways and develop design strategies, facilitated by someone who's like a work design strategist on the side here, also involving the workplace lawyers who understand those aspects of risk and compliance and safety professionals. Get a team of people and health and well-being specialists and, go through the list, industrial relations, people and culture, and start to tackle this problem, but have some collaboration where you break down silos and you wash away the walls of any competitiveness when there's an issue that is shared problem solving, and you start to look beyond Australia and go global and say this is something industry wide for the strength of the nation and strength of all children globally that we really need to approach. And when it's something that big, if it's retention and skills shortages, staffing shortages, and protecting one another through psychosocial measures. Is this a problem we are prepared to grapple with? Will we come together? Will we break down those barriers? And let's start to solve it. Because I agree, a law, I don't believe will solve this. Well, it's getting tension. It's obviously pushing boundaries.
Well, no, because it is a law now. My view is, it's a very cynical view, that they might just pay attention. It's human nature. It's a bit like until the psychosocial regulation we always knew psychosocial harm existed in the legislation, but suddenly you needed this prompt. My feeling is because it's now in tablet form, Moses-like, there may be perhaps impetus to do it in a more collaborative way. This, and like, for example, we don't choose to drive on the left-hand side of the road. We're ordered to. We're mandated. It's sensible to drive on the left-hand side of the road, otherwise there'll be no head collision. But I guarantee you, if there was no law that says you must drive on the left-hand side of the road, people just would drive wherever. Again, I think, and it's unfortunate, don't get me wrong, it's almost a shame that we've had to get to this level, but I believe this might facilitate what you're saying, Sarah.
So you think this will prepare, when things are tested to this boundary, then it propels some of the change here and after?
What do you reckon, Alan?
I think just as in only 10 of the commandments were kept and the others were thrown away, this could be one of the ones that gets thrown away. It does raise another issue, though, that's interesting, and it's the underlying cause for this discussion, which is when workers are expected to work outside their work hours, work on their weekends, take after-hours calls, it's often not captured in their position description, and very rarely are they remunerated for that time, or is it recognised? And it's not just the time on the phone, because you can't go out drinking if you've got to be available on the phone. So it consumes a bigger part of your life than just the time on the phone. So that's a bigger topic, and I can see that there'll be discussion about that in the future.
Consumes.
And unspoken expectations that you're talking about.
It's consumes. That's what it is. If work can be quite pervasive, it creep in. It can be insidious, dare I say, if you've got these workload demands or deadlines. Okay, from time to time, there's a spike. Something's got to be in. We're working on these papers, Sarah. It's got to be done. But imagine if this cumulative and conjunctive effect was day in, day out. You punch in, you're supposed to be punching in 8 o'clock to 4, but you're not. You're punching in 8 to 4, but the punch is not working.
You're available afterwards.
You're available afterwards, and technology has enabled that.
Oh, there's so much to unpack here, right? So several things are buzzing around in my head right now. One of them is almost the cultural acceptance of the way we work and what we appreciate, what we value. And the other one is some of that discussion that I've talked to you about, doing things that you love that sometimes take precedent of traditional aspects of wellness. There's a lot of assumptions about what wellness and well-being should be in a very Western culture view. So when I travel through Asia, go back to the cultural stuff, when I travel through Asia, some of the staff might work 7 days a week, or at least, 6 days and 7 and 6 and 7 and have few breaks. And I've always been curious about this because particularly like in Thailand and Laos, the happiness that seems to still exist in some hard work and some simple days. And what happens in that philosophy about how we're evaluating what's good or bad, because you're implying there's a judgment, there's an evaluation of what's good and bad in everything you're saying, Trajce, and with this law coming out. And so when you get to a point of acceptance and seeing that you can have a little play in your day as much as work, and that it's just part of this medley of life, the angst, the suffering, this sense of harm can diminish. So sometimes the cultural expectations around this, the perception about what work is and what it means to you, how others perceive it, can really, really impact on your joy, your sense of joy. But you go through Thailand and Laos, and I've just find so much more acceptance, philosophical acceptance around what a day in the life is, rather than just assuming. And I'm not saying that we should exploit people. Please let me say this really clearly, but I've always thought it was a very delicate, graceful, exquisite kind of dance of acceptance in life, having less suffering around this, And I love my work, and we've talked and you've teased me about how I work at weird times and all kinds of things, but Charlie Grantham, I've mentioned before. Charlie Grantham talks about how you measure health and well-being, right? And when you're just talking about your wellness, your well-being, and your wholeness, and those three levels. And when I'll repeat it very briefly here. So when your wellness measures maybe things like, your heart rate and your cholesterol levels and your traditional, sugar levels and how many steps in the pedometer you've taken, right? If you remember that. And then you've got your well-being measures. So you have your hand symbol, your heart symbol, your well-being measures, maybe a little bit more about your social effect, your psychosocial, can still be blood pressure and heart rate, physiological measures, but it's a little bit more about the climate surveys you do and, how you're perceiving things, which is what I'm getting at. And we assume that they should all be regulated all the time, and sometimes our initiatives, and yet there's the wholeness aspect, and he speaks about the wholeness aspect represented by the brain. And this wholeness aspect is, are you doing something aspirational? Are you doing something that you love? Is it making sense to you? Is there value? Is the action that you undertake, is that aligned with your values, right? And when you do that, sometimes you work incredibly hard. Like you said, paper, you're just feeling compulsive about having to get this idea expressed, or this podcast that we're here on a Sunday, right? This is a lot of extra time. I don't feel it as a compromise in workload because I love it. I absolutely love getting together with you guys. And so when you're doing something that meets that, you talked about Maslow's hierarchy, and something that's aspirational and elevates you and educates you and connects you with others in a positive way, then it's okay to temporarily have taken time away from the exercise session you were going to do. Maybe we have to grab quick food and it's not exactly what you would measure in your wellness. As long as you have systems to detect when it's too severe and you have time to replenish yourself and you don't completely erode your performance without some understanding of balance, because I don't think balance actually is always balance, if you will, 24/7, 5 days. For me, it definitely isn't. It goes up, down, around, and sideways. And I love that rhythm of change. You can't be passionate without having some of that.
Look, and I think that's right. All the thing about the example, okay, you've obviously got a little bit more freedom. I think in reasonably privileged positions, we've got a little bit more freedom. But I am thinking of using these two examples, the role of the teacher and the role of the police officer. Certainly, when I was a child, you'd think back, there were noble reasons for A, becoming a teacher, to impart that knowledge and watch young minds grow. B, police officer, to be proud in your community and ensure that it's a safe. So there are fantastic aspirational ideals in those two humble professions, and it is quite sad that those two professions are feeling claustrophobic about expressing all of these rhythms that you've talked about. And I think that's where it's come to. One-time teachers, they're leaving by the droves. I don't know if you've read the most recent article. It's the largest exodus of this most critical profession. Without policing, we're stuffed as well. So the thing is, isn't it sad that we've had to now, there'd be anarchy. The thing is, I imagine at one point in these two careers, especially teaching, there were these rhythms you talked about. There was a sense of wellness, there was well-being, there was wholeness. I'd like to believe that's how it should be. Well, not could be, should be.
People get into these with really positive ideals.
That's right.
You could throw healthcare in this discussion too, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm also speaking about is, and you said the word privilege, that level of commitment must be married with empowerment, with some autonomy, with some support, with some agency, with stimulating work that's not overstimulating, that you're completely exhausted to the point of burnout. So there has to be a great deal of support for people when we know that the demands are going to be high, right? So it's a marriage, a partnership between everybody and among everybody that's in that system. So absolutely, jobs must be designed well, but I think I've been pushing this idea about enduring impact. It goes back to, do we have the right built environment, the environment? Are we not having to do workarounds for the next 20 years? Have we got the right assets that we can live with well? And are we designing jobs well? Are we listening? I'll tell you one thing, a little tangent here. I was just having this discussion with a friend the other day. These obligations to go back post-pandemic to work have always been discussed, in our podcast and so much literature right now, right? The distributed situation of work. And most people are saying they want some time home, or somewhere else, work from anywhere, work. Why did we not pause with traditional conventional education and take that rich opportunity to pivot and say, if we're preparing people for an emerging point of work, our young students, and our teachers often are saying, why am I in the coalface not able to have variable schedules? And the kids are fatigued going to school 5 days a week. Why did we not take this rich opportunity to say, let's radically review how school and education occurs?
Well, I think there's a major push by employers now to get their employees back to work.
And there's still very controversial, a lot of revolt, a lot of people wanting some flexibility, right? So and a lot of companies still adhering to flexibility. So if we're allowing that, why are we assuming throwing children in a can, boom, 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 we'll push through it to a very conventional 5-day-a-week system at this type of schedule is actually effective? Why didn't we take the opportunity, we as a nation, we as a global society, Western world method of educating, and say, we've got a chance now. We've been thrown into upheaval, but this is an opportunity to evaluate how good quality education or policing or healthcare needs to occur. There are so many ways that we can do this differently.
And indeed, if there was a reconstituted, let's focus on teachers, perhaps the parents may be less stressed, and perhaps the parents may not be texting and emailing, and perhaps it could be a win-win for all the actors in that scenario.
When I was studying my MBA in the United States, our instructor, we did evening classes, and one of our classes was taught by someone who also did school teaching, right? That was her moonlighting job, and she did school teaching. But this was unique. Her school teaching operating rhythm and obligations for on-site occurred in a block, and I don't know exactly the block, so bear with me, but let's just say it was 3 weeks of a teaching block. Her students were in this class for 3 weeks, and it was a rotating mobile classroom. So then she packed up her whiteboard, and they'd have a week off. Students could recharge, and then she'd move to wherever the next location was in a week. And so they didn't have a very long summer break, because you didn't want any of the skills and the neurological firing to diminish. But there were enough rest and restoration kind of periods that people could recharge and then come back to good, strong, intensive learning. And they did a lot of scheduling innovations where the students, if they had brother and sister siblings, could align their class schedule so it suited the family. The family could take holidays when not the whole of the universe was on a holiday, right? And not have to pay exorbitant fees if they're going to Disneyland, let's just say, because this was in the United States, this was in California. And I remember then, and this is, more than 20 years ago, thinking, heck yeah, excellent. How good is that? And she loved it. She loved it.
Yeah, that's the idea of redesigning. Why do we have to always patch existing things if they're not working? And the best evidence to suggest it's not working is here we are, the legislature now having to intervene and put in right to disconnect. Anyway, food for thought.
Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Create a new path and let the people follow your signs. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Create a new path and let the people follow your signs. In my lifetime, I followed
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Why Work. You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan. And if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, please subscribe, and we'd be more than happy to provide you with information, names of cases, and other things that may interest you. Please be aware that none of the matters we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. See you next time.
Baker, all my life, an authority hater. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind. Educate your mind, cause the system will keep you blind.
You are listening to Trace Vitkovsky, Sara Pizzell, and Alan Girl.